devices. Please note the fire exit nearest to you. They're in the back of the house on the left and the right. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the International Association of Culinary Professionals Board of Directors, it is my pleasure to welcome 1,000 plus culinary professionals to New York City at the end of this month. The IACP connects culinary professionals with the people, places, and knowledge they need to succeed, and there's no better place to do that than New York City, my hometown. I'm pleased to be able to welcome Manhattan Borough President Scott M. Stringer, Borough President of, I think, the greatest borough in the world. Scott Stringer was elected Borough President in 2006, and since then he has focused on making Manhattan more affordable and livable, tackling issues such as housing, school overcrowding, public safety, balanced development, sustainability, and equal opportunities for underserved communities. But what really has impressed me, a culinary professional, about Scott Stringer is the issues relating to food that his office has tackled. In November of last year, they studied the impact that bringing a Walmart would have to Harlem. In April of 2011, he published a report called Red Tape, Green Vegetables, a plan to improve New York City's regulations for community-based farmers markets. I don't think I could live without my local green markets. In 2010, his office published Food NYC, a blueprint for a sustainable food system. That was done along with Alexa Vanderwall, who's a member of the board of directors of IACP's foundation, the Culinary Trust. And in June of 2009, he worked on a proposal to include food infrastructure in the city's environmental review. Why aren't we considering food when we're looking at environmental impacts? So without further ado, Scott Stringer.
Thank you. That was a very nice introduction. Thank you, Karin. And I want to welcome the International Association of Culinary Professionals. I think you're going to hear from true experts on public food policy, and I know many of these folks, and I think you're going to enjoy this. I want to just say a couple things about why I think a progressive food policy is important in New York City. And it starts with me growing up in Washington Heights in northern Manhattan way back in the 1960s, which may be an antique to some of you, but growing up back then, my mother prepared every morning a healthy lunch for my brother and I. She never missed a day. It was 2 pieces of white bread, Oscar Mayer bologna, and a banana every day. Back then, in the 60s, that was good food. That was healthy, balanced food. It was all over TV. Wonder Bread, bologna, right? It was the thing we all wanted to do, and then we had some chocolate milk. And I want to say that that was fine back then. But what we now know is that's not a healthy diet for young children. It's not a healthy diet for adults. And the problem is, many of us here know that, but in places throughout our city, in different communities, too many people are eating 2 pieces of white bread and bologna every day because food choice is limited, especially in communities that have real economic hardship. And part of what this movement represents to many people is to recognize in this great city that 1 out of 5 people live in poverty. 30% of children live in poverty. 800,000 individuals live in what's called food deserts, not food desserts, food deserts, where they don't have access to healthy produce. When I launched Go Green East Harlem in El Barrio a number of years ago, we created this wonderful, wonderful cookbook called Go Green East Harlem. And it's bilingual, and the people in the community created recipes in their own culture, and we vetted the recipes to be healthy. And it was a wonderful love story about what a community does when they want to create a sustainable neighborhood and speak about grassroots organizing around food policy. But the one critical we got from this book was from a young author who actually went to East Harlem and looked for the ingredients that these recipes were created. Because if you're going to create a healthy recipe, you certainly need different ingredients. And she wrote in her review of the book, it's a nice idea, but these ingredients do not exist in El Barrio or Central Harlem or the Bronx or in Washington Heights where I grew up. So we collectively have to recognize that as we create a genuine food movement, and it is taking place, and neighborhoods are being empowered, and food markets are opening, and farmers markets are opening, and we are cutting the bureaucracy in this city to the point where we can create a sustainable food supply. We don't have to get those apples in Washington State. We can get them right here in Washington County. We don't have a lot of land in the city, but our rooftops, the sky's the limit. We can create a whole new way of food supply and production if we educate people that this is the way we create jobs, prolong life, but for me, this is about making sure that people's longevity is based on a healthy diet that is not about the zip code you live in. If you live in Park Avenue in the 80s, I want you to eat as healthy as the people who live in El Barrio or Northern Manhattan. And that's why this movement is so important to get out to everybody. How do we do that? How do we do that? We listen to the experts. And then we take their knowledge and we organize in our community. And understand this as I close. Over 3 million New Yorkers are obese or overweight. 700,000 people have diabetes. At the same time, 1.5 million New Yorkers can't afford enough food. And 30% of the food grown in the US is going to waste, and we must act now. And when you think about our city government, I commend the mayor for his Plan NYC on sustainability and the green economy. But we must do better than out of a city workforce of 300,000. We need more than 2 individuals that work on food supply and procurement. I think it's time to create a city commissioner of food and markets with a standalone agency that can evaluate vertical farming, green roofs, zoning, create supermarkets that create healthy produce, green bodegas, and let's be the city that leads the world in a healthy environment that speaks to the issue of food supply and production. Enjoy this wonderful, wonderful event. I commend everybody, and I look forward to working with all of you in the months and years ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Peter Kaminsky. It's really very exciting to be kicking this event off. And I'm a journalist, I'm an author, I'm a television producer. I have a new book coming out called Culinary Intelligence, The Art of Eating Healthy and Really Well. And I hope you do both. And why don't we just go around and I'll let the panelists introduce themselves rather than repeating the webpage. Mike.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Anthony. I'm the executive chef at Gramercy Tavern.
I'm Gabrielle Langholtz. I'm the editor of 2 of the edible magazines, Edible Brooklyn and Edible Manhattan.
My name is Kim Kessler. I'm the food policy coordinator in the mayor's office.
My name is Marcel Van Ooyen. I'm the executive director of GrowNYC, best known for running the Green Market Farmers Market program.
I'm Karin Endy. I'm on the board of directors of the International Association of Culinary Professionals and chair of its foundation, the Culinary Trust.
All right, well, to kick things off, I'm a culinary amateur. I like to cook. I like to write about food, and I like to shop, and I'm interested in ingredients. And I think I love to eat. I love to eat. I love to eat at Gramercy Tavern. I've been eating there since the very first meal, July 11th, 1994. And my fellow amateur, I'd like Gabrielle to have a few words, because like me, I think she's been obsessed for a long time with exquisite microgreens. And then she had I'd say, a bright night of the soul and an epiphany. And you have some other things on your mind.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. Thank you, Peter. Peter and I were speaking on the phone a little bit about our talk this evening, and I talked a little bit about an epiphany that I had recently, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So as editor of the Edible magazines, I'm a huge dork about the locavore DIY lifestyle, and have been for many years, and really have seen it as a path to shaping a better food system, that through the choices that I make as a consumer and through the way I use my media megaphone in talking to my 100,000 readers about the choices that we all make, we can really build something great through, you've all heard the phrases voting with your fork or voting with your dollar. So I spent a lot of time doing things like, making pickles and jam and my own pasta, and like just really trying to get my carbon footprint in my own personal cupboards way down, and communicating with my readers about that kind of pursuit. And I was reading about a year ago Paul Greenberg's book, For Fish, and which is about, I think the subhead is the fate of the last wild food. I probably just got that wrong. But in his conclusion, so he's talking about, he chronicles the collapse and imminent extinction of many of the foods that we all love to eat but are eating to extinction. And in his conclusion, he said, he talked a little bit about the Monterey Bay Aquarium cards that I certainly carry, and really dismissed that, and said, it is a complete fallacy to think that your own personal choices are going to have any difference. And, all of the tuna that can possibly be caught internationally are being caught. And if he had this paragraph that said, if you get everyone in your entire city to commit to never eat this fish again, it's still going to go extinct in your lifetime. And I think I literally threw the book across the room in anger, because I felt that he had basically just spit in the face of my whole belief system that, together, by eating a particular way and making a particular set of choices, we're going to save the world. And, I slammed the book. I think I did throw it across the room. And then about a week later, this epiphany actually involves NPR, so here we are in the green space. But I was half-mindedly listening to Marketplace, and there was like a 6-second unanalyzed news item that said something like, today the Obama administration announced a stimulus initiative to greatly boost income to American farmers by quadrupling exports of soy to third world countries, increasing their meat supply. And the world stood still, and the scales fell from my eyes, and I realized that this is a moment of, I've been really searching my soul since this 6-second news piece, and thinking about whether spending a lot of time and money and headspace on making my own pie crust in every last detail and simmering my own corn cobs for stock is really the best use of those resources, and about the consequences of policy. And me and my 100,000 readers can all spend the rest of our lives as freegans, and what's that really going to mean, big picture, when the impact of policies like that have such breathtaking, sweeping impacts. So I'm really excited to hear from some of my fellow panelists about policy tonight, and think about how to communicate with my readers about changing this system, not just through our personal choices.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I was listening to the borough president. I was thinking, I was born in Kearny, New Jersey, just across the meadowlands here, and my grandma had a grocery store where I got all the free baseball cards any kid could ever want. And I basically lived on bologna and tasty cakes. I mean, I thought those were the two food groups for a long time. But that was a long time ago, and that was another country. I wanted to get some thoughts from Marcel here. We all have, I think everybody here, a mutual friend, sort of the godfather of green market movement in New York, Bob Lewis, and he's a neighbor of mine, and we were talking, and he is, you know, very proud of where green markets have gone to, yet he thinks there's that the market system in the city and the way that it helps farmers has a ways to go. And we were talking about this before, about wholesale and stuff. Marcel, if you wanted to address that a little bit.
Sure, thank you. And I think everyone, I hope, has shopped at a green market or another farmer's market in New York City, so you know the pleasures of buying local and the quality of the produce and the opportunity to meet your farmer. And that's a wonderful thing to have, and green markets and CSAs continue to grow and thrive. I think the number of markets in the country has doubled in the last 10 years. But if we're ever going to talk about real changes, Gabrielle was talking a little bit about, we need to talk about how we get the same type of produce into institutions, grocery stores, local produce into bodegas, our schools, our hospitals, et cetera. And that's going to take creating infrastructure that doesn't currently exist. When you buy produce at the farmer's market, you've completely cut out the middleman. You're buying directly from the farmer, so more of that dollar from the apples you buy are going into the farmer's pocket, which allows them to stay on their land and continue to do what they love. When you buy an apple at the grocery store, it's likely been touched by 3 or 4 other individuals who have all added a percentage of cost to that. So the transfer of that cost gets sent back to the farmer and reduces their overall income. And we've been losing farms, even though green market's a great success and we continue to preserve farms, we've been losing farms at an astonishing rate. 70% of the farms have been lost in New York State since the 1950s, and they continues to drop. And most of those are the mid-sized farmers who can't compete in the industrial agriculture system. They can't sell at a price that the wholesalers want to buy from so that the wholesalers can make their money and resell it. And they don't have an opportunity because there's no wholesale market or a value-driven food distribution option for them to sell their product. So their option is to diversify, sell at a green market, which requires them to grow more products and totally change the way they grow and become a retail grower, or dump their product on the wholesale market and hope that they can continue to stay in business. So the next big challenge to create real change in our region is to create that infrastructure that we can get that wholesale product and more dollars in the farmer's pocket. And I think, I think Michael could probably, from the purchasing perspective, talk a lot more about that, because he faces, he's one of the wonderful farmers, but he's blessed because he's near Union Square. He can walk down the street and buy wonderful product from the farmers. But there's a lot of stuff that he and other chefs that buy from the market have to buy on the wholesale level. Potatoes and onions and carrots that they use in large volume. That all needs to be purchased from a distributor. And the distributors don't care about putting money in the farmer's pocket. They care about getting as much money as they can out of the system so they can make money, which is, that's the American way. But if we want to protect the farms, we need to reverse that trend and create a value chain that respects the work that the farmer put into that product.
If I'm not mistaken, this is not like a pipe dream. There are these kinds of setups, like in Paris, right? Isn't that what they do at Rangis?
You can go even closer, go up to Toronto.
Right.
You go to Toronto where they have a burgeoning wholesale market, but in the parking lot of the wholesale market are 400 farmers in the summer who are selling directly to buyers and also selling to the wholesalers. So there's a great relationship between the farmer's market and the wholesale market. And I know I'm throwing a lot of terms around that are probably confusing to most person, but wholesale means you're not, when you go to the farmer's market, you're buying retail. Wholesale means that someone else has purchased it and it has a middleman, and then they're reselling it to the end user. That's happening in Toronto because the government of Toronto invested in that market early on and made the choice that if they were going to put money into a market that helps wholesalers, they were going to also help farmers in the process. So there are farmers who have graduated from just selling off their truck to now running houses. There are farmers who are selling to the wholesalers, selling directly to consumers, and the region around Ontario is thriving, and those farmers are doing well.
It was this way not too long ago in New York City until Yankee Stadium was rebuilt. We had a thriving market that supported, I think, thousands of farms, mid-sized farmers. Well, I want to be like Mike. I've been eating Michael Anthony's food for a long time now, and Danny Meyer's been a good friend of mine. I used to have an office. I had an office upstairs from Union Cafe before it was a good restaurant. It was just the only one there. But he's always been a great guy and built an organization that stands for the right things. So a lot of what we think about food and what we aspire to is what we've learned from chefs, I think, over the last 25, 30 years that we've had this food revolution in America. So by example and by what they serve us and where they buy it, we have learned something. But there have been groups within the industry like Chefs Collaborative and other things that Michael, Peter Hoffman, just an endless number of chefs are involved with that are both bringing people into the industry and bringing some smart policy and some choices about food into the broader population and not just the well-heeled clientele. So, Michael, if you want to touch on one of like the 500 you're involved in.
Sure. So this year we decided to take a step in a little deeper and try to further our relationship with one elementary school that we've been associated with. And we met the parents from this school, PS 41 in the West Village, by chance, and it was very kind of grassroots beginning, and I think maybe a lot of us have been a part of those kinds of relationships. We agreed to welcome the kids into the restaurant and show them around, and from that day started to build on that experience. And I guess part of this was trying to embrace the role of being an educator in the community. We were searching to create value for the folks that work in our restaurant. We were looking to engage in activities teaching kids, and over the last 6 years, we've been able to develop a very vibrant exchange. I think it's also, I'm looking at some of the folks who taught us how to be good teachers along the way that we met at the Green Market and in the school. And I think one of the interesting things that we established was a dialogue between the parents, administrators, and the restaurant staff. All that said and done, we had built a great program where we spent probably about 18 to 20 calendar days either in the school or with the kids in the restaurant or at the Green Market. And that was great, but we had stayed clear of the food program, the lunch program in the cafeteria. And regrettably, I think it seemed overwhelming, and I would imagine that feels the same way for most all of us. This year, we were encouraged by Wellness in the Schools, Director Nancy Easton and Executive Chef Bill Telepan, who I guess we'll hear about later this week. There's an activity planned.
Bill's going to teach a group of IACP members how to cook the ideal public school meal, followed by a lunch, and that lunch is open to the public for $35 to eat, just like kids along a lunch line. I'm thinking maybe I'll rush everybody out after 20 minutes to go to recess. But proceeds from that lunch will benefit Wellness in the Schools, along with Culinary Trust and the Future Cooks Initiative.
So the work that they've been doing is amazing. It's courageous to say the least, and the way we've been asked to engage in the process is to mentor one of the full-time culinary graduates who's been placed in the school. So each of the schools that participate in the WITS program have a culinary graduate. They call them a WITS in residence, so as not to ruffle the feathers of the full-time staff. But one of the, I don't mean to say that in a condescending way, because one of the major parts of this is not simply to figure out how to serve great food with ingredients that have not been on the approved list of the school food contract, but it has also been to give not just assistance, but value to the jobs, the full-time jobs, the people that have worked for years in those cafeterias. So it's more of a mind shift, a mentality change. And it's a dangerous process because here we show up in a white chef's coat and all of a sudden all the kids' attention is on us. We have a couple of ingredients that are new to them and fun, and we've worked hard along the way to present them in fun ways. But what are we, just a one-day show? Is it just a quick circus? Or is this really something that's beginning to latch on to some of the ideas that have been introduced? Is there a cohesive line of thinking, and is there support from the administration, from the teachers, from the parents, and then on through to the kids? So if we're doing anything right, as a restaurant, we're embracing our role as a teacher in the community. We are dedicating our time, and I'm not sure if we'll get into this tonight, but that it was an interesting point that came up in our conversation earlier, that this, to me, it seems not really a point of discussion, but this is both part of our jobs, but this is something that we owe our community. We're not doing this to receive compensation. We're not doing this to better the restaurant. We're doing this to play an active role. So it has been enlightening. This is our first year to do it full time, and we've seen that we can easily steal the show, but we can also see that with a little humility and respect and a little vision, we can start to treat the school lunch program as a place that has value in everyone's eyes. So it has been a wonderful experience for us. And I should just add that the benefit from this from the restaurant's end is we've seen the enthusiasm grow, and we've seen so many folks participate in this program in a whole number of different ways. So it has been an interesting beginning and a great extension of our activity.
Thanks, Michael. So as a stay-at-home writer yesterday while pretending to work, I looked at my Twitter feed, and Michael Pollan, a food writer who some of you may have come across, tweeted about this letter that, at least as of yesterday, it was 8 big city mayors, including Mayor Bloomberg, had signed concerning the Farm Bill, the passage of the Farm Bill, or the rewriting of the Farm Bill. And so there's some, on the one hand, there's what we do in schools. On the other hand, is what we do as a society at large. And Kim and I were talking a little bit about exactly the issues that have come up through this. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Our office, we're located in the mayor's office, and we work with all different city agencies to advance our overall administration's food policy agenda, which includes aspects of things that everyone has talked about here. And one of our roles is also advocacy with the state and federal government. And we've come to see, how influential in terms of talking about big picture policy change. The real focus of our work on a day-to-day basis is what can we do at the municipal level around food policy, and really advancing the agenda of meeting underserved communities and fighting obesity and diet-related disease, and addressing disparity. But there's a lot of levers that we can pull in terms of municipal policy and what city agencies can do. But there is still the big picture food system, which we know is really governed by the Farm Bill, often now called the Food Bill. And so in thinking about that, we really looked to the Farm Bill and thought this is a time to make clear how meaningful the Farm Bill is from a city perspective. It has for a long time, and this has been changing over recent history, but been thought about as something that's more significant for, big agriculture states, which New York is one of, but not often thought of as that. And, a more kind of Midwestern issue. And if you really look at the Farm Bill, it's incredibly impactful to cities for a number of reasons. And not only because nutrition assistance programs make up, and that's food stamps and school meals and the emergency food system that comes out of the farm, the emergency food supply that comes out of the Farm Bill that supplies pantries. That's about 80% of Farm Bill budget, actually. But but it's also really, what does the Farm Bill, what kind of food system does the Farm Bill encourage? And we thought it was really important, Mayor Bloomberg thought it was really important to be impactful around advocacy on this and to make a big statement about how important this is to cities and work with other cities that have real food policy agendas and have been giving consideration to these issues. And so it was actually 10 cities that signed on to the letter, which gave kind of a broad strokes outline of, what we'd like to see in the Farm Bill this year, these mayors would like to see. And the big picture kind of priorities for that was maintaining funding for our emergency food programs and the SNAP program, the nutrition assistance programs. And then really second, aligning our Farm Bill with our health priorities. So if we look at, the crises of obesity and diet-related disease, what can we do through the Farm Bill to address those issues? And that means making sure we have adequate supply to fresh fruits and vegetables and, using SNAP, the SNAP program, the food stamp program, to increase the amount of healthful food choices that people can make. Third, we recognize the Farm Bill as something that can really drive economic development, and we look at a lot of the programs that have come out of the last Farm Bill, or the last two Farm Bills really, but in terms of programs that have been dedicated to connecting farmers to urban markets. We know there's such a shortage in many neighborhoods of access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and there's a lot of small programs that have started to address that in terms of providing funds for things like supermarket incentive programs, where you can draw development into neighborhoods that really need them and provide grant funding and financing packages that make sense for supermarkets, or the community food development grants, which allow communities to really take time together and figure out what do they want for their food system. And these are all programs that come out of the USDA through the Farm Bill, so we wanted to encourage that. And then the fourth kind of priority for the mayors was conservation programs, and just emphasizing, we don't see these things in tension. We recognize that though we're from urban communities, we want to have strong, robust conservation programs, which ultimately lead to our water supply and our long-term food supply. So those were the priorities that were outlined in the letter, and it was really great to be able to have 10 mayors sign on to it, and hoping that we can follow up on that with continued advocacy at the federal level. On the Farm Bill, as we, hopefully all can work together on getting a great Farm Bill in the near term. But I wanted to just quickly circle back to something that Gabrielle said, really about the whole question of policy versus individual behavior, because I think it also really does relate to, a lot of the city's thinking about food environment and obesity and diet-related disease, and the kind of question of individual choice. Is it, we don't really think about it in terms of, is it about individual choices and eating healthy? It's really about, what does our food environment look like in neighborhoods? And our mantra is, how can we make the healthy choice the easy choice for everybody? So it's not so much, teaching on a one-on-one basis, like these are what you need to do to make healthful decisions. It's really from a policy perspective. At the municipal level, it's about making an environment where it's easy to buy healthy food for your family, have access to that, have it be affordable, and have it be a choice that that is reinforced by the environment around you. It shouldn't be a really difficult task that you have to dedicate tons of time and resources to be able to have a healthy meal for your family on a day in, day out basis. And so, I think that's a big focus area for us.
If I just wanted to jump in and applaud Kim and the mayors for stepping into this, because I think people in the Midwest would kind of roll their eyes if they thought that, why is New York City weighing in on the Farm Bill? But it has a direct effect. The Farmers Market Nutrition Program, which gives out vouchers to seniors and also women on WIC, took a cut this year. In fact, in
WIC,
Women,
yeah,
infants, and children.
Infants and children.
Women, infants, and children. So if you're pregnant or have a small child, you can qualify for WIC, and you get a certificate that you can use for produce in the market. This program, which it's taking a huge hit this year, and if you're at the Green Market, look for the letters to contact your elected officials about, has a direct effect on what happens in the markets. We will have markets closed down if this program does not get refunded. There will be farmers who may lose their farms as a result of this, because in some of our markets, not we all, people who know Union Square and other markets, we have 57 markets around the city, or will this year, Some of them are in very low-income communities where 80% of what the farmer is taking in is either food stamps or WIC certificates. And without that money, they're not going to be able to survive to go to that market, and they just won't go. And they can't pay their bills, and they can't grow their produce. So
And without those markets, think what that means for that neighborhood and those customers.
a complete lack of access to fresh, healthy produce. And you heard the borough president talk about food deserts. So these issues about the Farm Bill are not esoteric. They're real. And they have a real effect in our access to food across the city and how farmers stay in business. So.
Well, that brings me to a topic that I thought we might discuss a little bit. I guess the sensationalist word is food desert, but you might want to redefine that in certain ways. But certainly if, like for example, if the Green Market disappears from Poe Park in the Bronx, I don't know where those people are going to go to get great fresh food and vegetables. And there's this wonderful, did any of you see the online, the TED conference that was earlier this month about food? Well, I mean, I always thought TED was like sort of, you get to play Steve Jobs for 18 minutes, you know, with the big screen in back here. But there are really some very inspiring people there, including these two women from the Bronx. And one of them spoke about the program you were just talking about, and one of them spoke about the green cards. So I just wondered if you had some thoughts about addressing what we've come to call in, food deserts, and you know, different ways that we're coming at this. And that's open to the floor. Or this floor.
I think Kim and I can go on for about 3 hours on that. Do
it in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Well, I'll just say a couple of quick things. One comment about that is just the kind of terminology around food deserts. It's been maligned for a number of reasons, but one thing about that terminology is that in New York City, when we think about it, you know, there's sort of been evolution towards the term of food swamp, because we recognize that in a lot of neighborhoods, it's not so much that we have, you know, no food, it's that we have this kind of overwhelming abundance of, you know, calorie-rich but nutrient-lacking products that are being heavily marketed and just everywhere and cheaply priced and ubiquitous, yep. And a real lack of access to the more healthier items. So that's kind of just one big picture point that we think about trying to encourage food balance, trying to get as much food balance in neighborhoods. And it's something that's been a really high priority for the city, and particularly the Department of Health, which has developed a number of, really been in the lead in developing innovative strategies to addressing this, and developed a number of model programs. Green Cards is one of them that other cities have looked to, and really across all levels of infrastructure for retail access. So we have the Green Cards program, which is a mobile vending program that allows vendors licenses for selling just fruits and vegetables in neighborhoods where we know there is greater issues of diet-related disease and disparity in terms of access. And we also have a FRESH, which is a financing and incentive program, zoning incentive program to attract developers for supermarket development in the neighborhoods that need supermarkets the most. We have an intervention, a technical assistance intervention for bodegas. It's called the Healthy Bodegas Program, and GrowNYC has done great work in conjunction, which I'll let Marcel talk about in conjunction with that. But it's basically trying to work with the existing infrastructure and have bodega owners, you know, stock more healthy items, stock more produce, learn about how to purchase produce, learn about how to store it, stock some lower sodium items, show water at eye level as opposed to just sugar-sweetened beverages, those kind of things. And then, you know, one of our favorite health department programs, it's actually a partnership with the Human Resources Administration, which oversees food stamps, is the Health Bucks program, which is a coupon incentive program for food stamp users to try and encourage food stamp users to make purchases at farmers markets. And basically every time a food stamp user spends $5 at a farmers market, they get a $2 coupon for fresh fruit and vegetables that they can then redeem at the farmers market. So it extends their purchasing power and obviously puts more dollars into farmers' pockets. So.
Yes, thank you. The funny thing about Gabrielle used to work for Green Market, and back the story of food stamps in the farmers markets has been a tortured one for many years, but when they went from paper to the EBT cards, it wiped out access to food stamps for people who wanted to shop at the farmers market. You have a card that needs to be swiped and have to have a wireless terminal, or a terminal. So you can still go to the grocery store and swipe your card, but
or the bodega,
but you didn't have access to the best produce in the city at the farmers market. So we started to create a program, I guess 6 years ago now, where we wanted to put the food stamps in the farmers market, and working with the Department of Health, we were able to pair it up with the Health Bucks, which has become a huge success. Our sales have gone up 110%. It's weird to say that because people, or actually it's 1,500% if you look at the entire thing. People think I'm crazy when I use that number, but we had $5,000 in sales in 1995. We were going to have over $600,000 in sales last year, and probably
In food stamp sales.
in food stamp sales at the farmers markets, and close to 1 million hopefully this year. And the most two statistics that I think are most amazing about this is that 88% of what people buy are fresh fruits and vegetables. You can buy the M&M cookies that some of our farmers make, God forbid. But when with your food stamp, if it's edible, you can buy it. But people want that healthy, fresh produce that everybody wants. So this idea that people in low income don't want it, they want to eat bad food, is not true. They want to eat good food. Everybody wants a good peach. You just have to make it available, and you need to make it priced where they can afford it. So by pairing up the health bucks and the food stamps as an incentive, it's worked amazingly well, and now as being copied all over the country, which gets back to the earlier comment about the farm bill. We spend billions of dollars paying farmers in the Midwest to grow soybean. I'm going to channel Michael Pollan here a little bit. To grow soybeans and corn that can be turned into high fructose corn syrup and
animal feed.
And animal feed, and to create garbage food, which are sold in low-income areas, really cheap, soda, etc. And we spend very little money until recently incentivizing low-income people to buy healthy produce from small farmers. If you turn that, if we can turn that ship, that huge ship around, and start to take those incentives where you're going to give that to someone on food stamps, and you're going to level the playing field where they can afford to buy the produce, they will. They'll eat better, they'll be healthier, our healthcare costs will go down, and the farmers will thrive.
Totally. Thank you so much for connecting that to the big picture subsidies. And thank you so much for your comments, and also moreover for your work. I mean, the playing field is so uneven. And when you talk about the built environment, or you didn't say built environment, the food environment, I mean, people look at these programs and say, oh, the city is broke. How can I afford to spend a few $100,000 when federally we spend billions of dollars a year propping up these cheap fast foods, and then expect someone to make a different choice that's going to be more expensive than this artificially cheap, worse for public health and the environment choice. So anyway, sorry, thank you.
So one of the things that, as chair of IACP's foundation, that I'm always looking to is how we can give culinary professionals the tools and opportunities to act on critical issues. So if the topic today is food policy, how can we engage culinary professionals in their philanthropy, which so many of us do, around food policy? What kinds of things can they be doing to make a difference? We're talking about a broad spectrum of culinary professionals that we represent, everyone from food writers, food stylists, to chefs, to people that work in policy. I mean, it's just, we represent everybody.
For example, what kinds of things come to mind?
Well, should we get more engaged in letter writing campaigns and calling our Congress people, or should we be encouraging people to vote with our fork? Like, what are the top 3 action items we should encourage our members to do?
Yeah, and just to second onto that, like, what I would like to know, what kinds of calls to action I should give to my readers. Like, I've published an op-ed saying, please drink hard cider from New York State instead of beer, and please eat more.
You don't have to tell me that twice.
And eat more goat meat. But what about
local
policy?
Beer now.
There is. That's true. That's true.
And local bourbon,
but I would
too.
love to know what kinds of policy calls to action I can give to my readers and eaters.
Well, I have one. I mean, one thing I think you're being awfully hard on yourself in terms of, the locavore, your locavore dorkness, because I really do
That's
think.
the new catchphrase, local dork.
I think those were her words. Those were her words.
I did, yes. You can say hardcore locavore.
want that
if you
t-shirt.
prefer.
Hardcore locavore, okay. But I want to say, I think, certainly like systemic things are, the more are where the real big answers are going to come from. But I think it's been an incredibly important part of raising awareness, and even, as we've all seen the kind of growth in terms of what sector is the market growing. It's organics that are growing. It's, healthy, it's local items that are growing. Everyone knows this about market demand. So it's influential in that thing. But even more so, it's telling the story of, you know, food system change. How has it changed over the last 30 years? That goes hand in hand with the public health story, you know, that we see in terms of, you know, obesity being flat at 15% or so until 1980, and then going up and up and up till now, where we have 2/3 of Americans obese or overweight, and, you know, 1 in 5 kids in the city school. So, but got sidetracked in the public health story. But in any case, I mean, I think it's been really important, and I think in terms of chefs have been so influential in telling that story about the food system and getting people, you know, reoriented to thinking about where their food comes from. And I mean, one thing I think, you know, we can think about more like concrete programmatic things, but that continued emphasis on storytelling and leadership is something I do think that's critical.
Yeah, I think, Michael, this would be a great place for you to jump in, because, you know, here's someone who not only has his business invested in helping farmers, but is now giving back to the community and trying to work with the next generation. I think maybe the missing piece that chefs don't think about, because they're often focused on what's in front of them, you know, is that kind of larger picture and how they can take the people who follow them, because they, you know, chefs are the new rock stars, and kind of lead them into the larger revolution that's happening. But they have been, you know, chefs have been leading this fight for many, many years, and the markets exist in many ways because of the people like Michael who are shopping there.
Well, so, I mean, there are all kinds of opportunities. You know, again, when you put that white chef's coat on, all of a sudden it gives you an immediate platform. I'll just talk about one particular thing that we decided to do that was just a little bit outside of, outside of our area of expertise, but yet we learned a lot through the process. We decided to take on one of the first externs from the New York Farm School. So a new initiative that was initiated by Just Food and modeled on the Santa Cruz school and established here on the East Coast. And while there wasn't an immediate connection to a restaurant like Gramercy Tavern, there was a lot of interest in seeing from some of the students' perspective of these are folks who are gaining technical expertise, learning about urban agriculture, also learning about social, racial justice. But these are future entrepreneurs, and so we have brought in the first wave of externs into the restaurant to study food production, to think about how they'll use the recipes that they've learned to cook in our kitchen to ramp up in the communities that they'll work in, whether that's community center, churches, schools. And it's been a great way to make the folks that work in the restaurant insiders to that activity. So the New York Farm School is an amazing organization to support.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, does anyone know when we started? Because I want to make sure we have some time for some questions. How long have we been here? Say what? Do you know when we started? Sorry? Okay. Do you have questions? Are we ready for that?
There's somebody.
You're on.
Oh, we need the wireless mic.
With relationship to the series of months of the Occupy movement having built. I'll start over. Yes. With the series of months of the Occupy movement building, trying to shed light and speak truth to the various places of corruption, whether it's in our food systems or in any other system that our governments are working with. I'm curious how you see participating in helping to make a more long-term drastic change, even though we need to make daily incremental policy change. I feel like since the political system is fairly corrupt, that sort of reform isn't going to make the kind of change that we all really hunger for and really need as a worldwide community, for the planet, for foods we love to eat, for things that are going to be healthy for our families. I mean, you can just look across the board. So I would open that up to anybody.
That's pretty global. Anyone want to pick up the ball there?
Well, before this job, I was a legislative director for the New York City Council, and I've worked in New York City politics for many, many years. I think that you have made change just by you folks being here and coming to these meetings and talking about these issues. You had a borough president come up and talk about a food agenda. When has that ever happened in New York City? I grew up in California, but I'm sure others who have lived here much longer than me can probably never heard of this issue even being talked by an elected official, more or less them competing for the spotlight on food issues, which is what is happening. So the cultural shift is changing. And I mean, the interesting thing about Occupy Wall Street is we had a green market at Zuccotti Park, and we had to move because of the protest. I may not totally agree with you on the change they were making from my perspective. We wish they'd bought more apples from us. But they were getting a lot of food in for free, so I don't blame them. Those sandwiches looked great. You know, the global change is happening, and I think that we all should think about how we can be involved in that everyday, not just shopping at the market. We run a bunch of other, we're known for running Green Market, but we run a bunch of other wonderful programs. We build community gardens. We have the Grow to Learn School Garden Initiative. We educate teens and young people around the city about where food comes from and how to eat better. Composting programs, so a whole slew of those programs. You can go on our website and you can volunteer, you can get involved, you can get involved in your community. Our focus is small steps, small change in your community leads to big change. And so not only participating in the electoral process and writing your congressman, because having worked in an elected official's office, if we get 20 letters on an issue, we pay attention. And people don't think that happens. If I got 20 issues on letters on an issue, I think that there must be some serious problem on this issue, and you react and you try to address it, because elected officials, as you can say that the system is corrupt. It's a democracy, and they respond to their constituents. So it's and part of that is participating both on a day-to-day level and also raising your voice when you want change.
Yeah. What's that website address? What's the web address?
GrowNYC.org.
I just wanted to add a little PS that I think that there's been one of the benefits of the Occupy movement has been a lot of awareness and consciousness raising about the influence of lobbying and dollars. And I think just being aware of those influences is a first step towards solution, but it's a long path.
It's great. You can't see anybody. It's just like that shadow over there.
Just a side note about Zuccotti Park. I did, during Occupy Wall Street, I was going every week and bringing apples that I bought at Union Square Green Market. So there was some balancing that took place that maybe wasn't accounted for.
I don't want, I'm being humorously facetious about it. We understand what was happening there, and we actually donated produce to the protesters. It just didn't work together because of where our trucks were. And
No,
actually we moved to a better location, so it all worked out.
But my question was actually about good food, good eating, and labor rights, and how the working conditions are going in America, particularly for people, say, making between $10,000 and $50,000 a year, which is a huge portion of America. I mean, I'm very involved in these conversations about how can we get Americans to eat better, but keeping in mind this is a very high-income community in New York City, and I was heartbroken to read the article in New York Times about a new phenomenon of 24-hour daycare centers.
Right.
And people that are having to work so hard, they have to leave their children at daycare center
Little
from, say,
children.
2 a.m. to 7 a.m. And people working triple shifts, they're trying to pay for their health insurance. And in that context, it's impossible to eat healthy, no matter where you are, or to have access. So how can we try to link those two issues? Because many places that people are working are not providing good circumstances. 9 to 5 is almost a luxury for many people these days.
I mean, before I turn over the floor, it's also true that a lot of these people who are working, 26/7 to feed us, come from south of the border, and they're precisely the people that Jan Brewer and company get so energized about, and I don't know what we'd be eating without them. So anyway, does anybody want to? No?
Well, I think probably I would say Kim would be the most qualified to talk about that, because the city does have, and it's unfortunate that happens, and it's kind of role of government to try and fill those gaps now, sadly. So I think the city's been pretty progressive on that.
So thank you, Marcel. So one of, our core objectives of our office is to increase utilization of the food support programs that we administer, which includes food stamps and also really school meals. And school meals are sort of part of the answer to what you're talking about in terms of, how can we have, and it actually comes to a kind of short-term versus long-term tension that I think we're all talking about in terms of balancing objectives, because school meals are actually extremely nutritious here in New York City. We've made a lot of advances and changes in the school meal program, and we try to
just to interrupt when you're talking about Bill Telepan, when he originally was talking about wellness in the schools, he told me the recipe for barbecue sauce at one of the schools he went to, and he went to the lunch lady, for lack of a better phrase, a culinary professional, and asked her, how do you make your barbecue sauce? And she said the recipe is half ketchup, half grape jelly.
Thank you, Marcel.
It's since changed.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was.
Having covered a lot of barbecue festivals, that's not
Right.
really far afield from what a lot of champions come home with.
It makes a great glaze, actually. I tried it at home.
Standard recipe out of the 60s.
Yeah.
Meatballs and bridal shop.
Yeah.
But I think what your question really gets at is what can we do? I mean, at least from the city perspective, what can we do to help the people who are struggling the most to still have healthy meals, and especially for kids and families. And so we really want to promote the school meals program. We do have free breakfast available every day at our city schools. Throughout the summer, we promote the summer meals program, which is when any kid in the city can eat free meals at our summer meal site, anybody under 18, and to make those meals as nutritious as possible. I think that's one of the things that we have 70% of kids in the city who are qualifying for a free or reduced lunch, and it's a 1.1 million kid student population in New York City. So just if we think about the kind of scale of the school meals program, I mean, that's something I could talk about at length in any case, but it's really important goal of it is to make sure that we're feeding the kids who need it the most, and making sure that the quality of the meals is as good as it can possibly be with the constraints that we have.
Please.
Hello. Anyway, what I'd like to ask about, I live in a world that borders on both food and real estate. I work in real estate and I work in food both.
The two
Stay
biggest
alive.
New York obsessions.
What can I say? I picked two good ones. I moved here 6 years ago from Fort Lauderdale. One of the reasons I moved here was for better opportunities, better jobs, more influence in the culinary world. One of the things I'm seeing, though, and happening basically in Manhattan and starting to branch out into some of the other boroughs, is it's the young chefs and small restaurateurs, or especially restaurants like, a perfect example of which is the 2nd Avenue Deli, which got pushed out of their location because Chase Bank can pay 20 times more the rent than they could, and they never bought their building. Is there anything the city can do to help keep independent restaurateurs and their rates down, and on top of that, they're being hit with this whole thing of the food grading, and now with this whole scandal going on with Per Se, great restaurant, I love Thomas Keller, I got nothing against, but it's just, the system you have here in the city seems to not be a system. It seems to be whatever they feel like. And there, as Chef Anthony, correct, knows, there are various cuisines that there are to make a certain product in the various cuisines in Tibetan or Uzbek or some other cuisine from around here, which is the wonderment we have, is that there are, according to American standards, there may be unclean conditions, like fermenting cabbage for your kimchi or doing something else, or fermenting lemons for Moroccan food. But these things may be perceived as health incidents or health problems. Is there any way we can talk to the city of helping out the young chefs, the restaurateurs, the people who have been in the same place for 40, 50 years? I just last night had dinner at L&B Spumoni Gardens. They've only been there 70 years, but they own the land, and the food is tremendous.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody want to pick that up?
To me, this is comes back to a broader question about zoning, and one of the things that IACP does each year in the conference host city is there's a group of culinary professionals that work with kids, and they go either to a local school or a local community center and teach a cooking class. And this year we're doing 3 cooking classes at Bed-Stuy Campaign Against Hunger, and they're also the recipient of our Richard Sachs Hunger Relief Grant. And they have 2 backyards that they farm, and there's a huge vacant lot next to them that's city-owned. And I'm going to preface this by, they tell me that they've been trying for years to get that land to be able to farm it so they can provide more fresh, healthy food to the clients of their food pantry, and they've been unable to do that. They said now that it's reserved for development, and they said, okay, great, as part of this development plan of the city, can you give us the roof so we can farm the roof? We're flexible, we'll kind of do anything, we just want to grow more healthy food for our constituents. So coming back to the initial question, I think it's one about zoning and what are the city's priorities with zoning with respect to food.
Well, we're lucky in New York City because we don't have any zoning restrictions on urban agriculture, in terms of a lot of cities have to go through a lot of zoning changes to allow urban agriculture in certain areas. Obviously, one of the huge tensions that we have is that we have, a city, the most dense city, where land is really coveted for a lot of different uses. And so, from a municipal policy perspective, it's always about there's huge demand for affordable housing, there's huge demand for a lot, green space, a lot of different things. All of that said, there's been obviously a lot of interest in urban agriculture, and one of our objectives that was in Plan YC, which in our update in April, incorporated food for the first time, so we're very excited about that, but and a number of initiatives relating to urban agriculture, including the goal of identifying municipal land that would be suitable for urban agriculture. And it's definitely the case that that's not true for any vacant, municipal land. There are all kinds of access issues, remediation issues, things like if they are part of a strategic development plan for a different space. But identifying the spaces that are appropriate for that is one of the goals that is coming out of Plan YC. And currently we have the Green Thumb program is the main mechanism for the starting of gardens or the transfer of city property for urban agriculture uses, and it is the largest community garden program in the country. So it's certainly an issue where we have a very strong history in that area, and we have a lot of movement towards, a commitment to developing that. I think in terms of rooftops, there's a lot of challenges in terms of cost for rooftops and a lot of engineering challenges. So I'm obviously not talking about that specific case, but just in terms of that, it's certainly an opportunity, but it also in some cases, there's much less sort of barriers to entry with developing urban agriculture on vacant actual land as opposed to rooftops, but a lot of opportunity there too.
Please.
I was gonna say, it's also, we work with Green Thumb and HPD, which is the city's housing agency, and they've actually, at least in the recent years, have come to us on many occasions saying we have this piece of land that can't be developed. Phoenix Garden out in Bed-Stuy is a perfect example of a triangle piece of land that couldn't be developed. We work with them to raise private money to turn it into a community garden. Now there's 50 gardeners there who are growing so much produce that they can't eat it all. They're giving it to the soup kitchen nearby, similar to what you're talking about. Right across the street, and this gets back to the earlier comment, is a public daycare center, which one of the things we also do is raise money to build play spaces next to them. And now we've been talking to DFTA, which is the agency that handles the senior centers, not DFTA, ACS, the agency that handles the daycare centers, about getting more of those public spaces open to the kids so that they can play, because a lot of these kids are there for many, many hours, and they need to get outdoor and enjoy the outdoors, and also integrate growing into those gardens so that they can have a play space and also see how produce is actually created. So
that's fantastic.
I think we all hear that one story where it doesn't work, but there are 100 stories where it actually has worked, and the agencies have been really focused on this. And the other, I think, success story is the Department of Transportation, which creates plazas around the city, has approached us on many occasions wanting to put farmers markets on those plazas, which had never happened in the past. We always begged to have a farmers market somewhere. Now our list is too long of places that the city wants to put farmers markets. You don't have enough farmers for them, that's the challenge.
How many farmers markets are there up in Harlem and in the Bronx?
I don't.
Usually the prices at these farmers markets are rather expensive for somebody who lives in
That's actu-
Harlem and the Bronx.
That's actually not true. We've done price surveys comparing to the produce at every grocery store in the area, and both our green markets and other farmers markets prices are either lower or comparable to what's being sold in the local bodegas and grocery stores.
With far superior quality.
Farmers markets are up there, though.
There are probably, I would say, a total
20.
of, no, probably more. Just green markets. There's, you know, they're probably about, I'd say, 30 to 40 in Harlem and the Bronx in total.
And some of them are some of the best farmers markets, some of the busiest farmers markets in the whole system. I mean,
175th
Washington
Street,
Heights,
yeah.
125th Street, you could get stampeded. I mean,
Yeah.
the community there clearly does not think it's overpriced because they line up before the farmers get there. Poe Park in the Bronx, too, you mentioned, really bustling.
And Marcel, you mentioned 55 that green markets, but there's 120 something, right?
125, 130.
Yeah, farmers markets in New York City. I guess we're getting close to wrapping up time here. Karin, did you want to say anything about what's coming up with IACP?
Sure. Just on the topic of the last question, as part of the IACP conference, there's going to be a debate between Adam Gopnik and Dan Barber about whether farm-to-table is economically sustainable or viable. And I have my own opinions about where that comes out, and I'm a little biased towards what Marcel just said. The Culinary Trust has a full day of programming supporting chefs' move to schools, and tickets for that are available to the public. It's not limited to IACP members. Brian Wansink, who does food marketing up at Cornell Brand Lab, is going to be speaking along with Ellie Krieger and Chef Bobu, who runs the school food program at the Calhoun School. In the afternoon, we've got a real nuts and bolts section on how to write culinary curriculum, nutrition basics for culinary professionals, and then a little networking and information session for people who are interested in working in schools, whether as a volunteer or as a professional. So all that's open to the public. It's not just you have to be an IACP member to come to this fabulous week-long conference. So there's a lot going on, and I hope that if you're not already a member or you're not already involved in some way, that you check us out.
All right, well, thanks a lot. So, I guess it's hard to be a leadoff batter, but we've had this kickoff event for this year's IACP. I really want to thank everybody for their courage in showing up and their generosity with their time and their fine contributions. And thank all of you for coming out, and we'll see you as it goes forward.